The evils of socialism.
The evils of socialism?
hmm You said
Okay, well,
capitalism versus socialism, right?
sure, as like a general broad strokes topic, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
So evils of socialism, what do you like? Okay, so why don't you go ahead and make a claim then?
A claim about socialism.
Yeah, so you just want to talk about the evils of socialism to start with. So let's kind
Yeah,
of,
I'll give.
you want to narrow in on that subject a little bit?
Sure, I'll give a definition. I'll give two definitions, and we can
Okay.
narrow in. So the first definition for socialism is socialism is a populist ideology designed to incite resentment, theft, and violence to gain political and economic control. The second definition is socialism is a centralized, state-controlled economy with heavy government regulations, oversight, and resource distribution. Socialism is associated with authoritarianism, repression of political dissent, limitations on individual freedoms, political and social upheaval, and economic instability.
Okay, there's the definitions of socialism that you were working with.
Yes. First one,
Then
I
then I'm
did.
not a socialist.
You're not a socialist. Well,
If
let me.
if that's the definition of socialism that we're using, then no, I'm not a socialist.
Okay. Do you believe in class struggle?
Yeah, to an extent. I don't believe in like an over mythologized sense of class struggle, but yeah, I think that there is class stratification that emerges as a natural consequence of capitalism, and people in differing strata of those classes, by the nature of being in that class, will have differing and contradictory material interests and disparate access to power and political capital, which affects how the government functions and what interests the government serves.
And they will use that power or political capital to be in conflict with the other classes or the worker class.
Yeah, to some extent or another, I think that's true. Now,
Okay,
I don't
so
think that that is
so
always the same level of true, but to some, I think it's self-evident to one extent or another that
oh,
that's
I
true.
I disagree completely that it is true and that it is self-evident. But I mean, basically, it's class struggle. It's vanilla class struggle, pretty much like the wiki entry of class struggle. I mean, you said that you're not adopting the historical materialism, or are you? I'm not sure, but you mentioned you're not adopting the historical materialism uh, version of class struggle, but you're saying it's self-evident.
Well, as an example, right? Just as like a more specific example, if I have a firm, right,
Mm-hmm.
and in that firm I have employers and employees.
Well,
So
but
there are
wait.
people
Let
who.
me. I understand. I understand what you're going. Let me just before we get to that, let me just extend what I said at the beginning, and then you can give that example.
Okay.
Um. So basically, the first definition I gave is that it is a populist ideology, and the idea here is class struggle. And if I expand more on what I mean by populist, is that you have a majority in group and you have a minority out group, and the populism is saying that that minority out group is causing all our problems for the majority in group. That would be the populist. You're scapegoating, or the ideology scapegoats a minority out group, so the focus of attention, hatred is on the minority out group that is causing all the issues. That would be the definition. And I think if you agree with class struggle, then to some degree you're agreeing with that definition, at least as I have explained it.
Okay. I mean, is there a question in there?
Do you agree that that is how I phrase?
I
Do you
think
agree with
that's
how I phrased it?
I think that the overall description of class struggle is fine, but I think it's very reductionist, and I think that there are a lot of other things that come into play here. I don't think that it's just this like sort of mythologized. We have our in-group, majority in-group, and all of the problems in the world are caused by this minority out-group, and it's all their fault, so they need to be like overthrown. I don't really subscribe to that sort of level of reductionism.
Okay, so assuming you believe in class struggle to some degree, or let's say you're saying it's a nuanced approach, um,
Yes.
you still are for taking away the means of production from the capitalists and giving it to the workers, or is that not the case?
Um, I would say in general, yes. But there's many different ways to go about doing that. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm a reformist.
Uh huh.
So I don't believe in like a violent insurrection where some imagined future where all the workers or poor people or the peasant class takes torches and pitchforks and goes and kills all the rich people and takes their shit. I don't think that that's an intelligent way about planning a future for an economic system in a society. That's not what I subscribe to.
I see. So you disagree with how the USSR went about implementing socialism?
Yes, I am not. I am not a supporter of the USSR or of Maoist China or of any Marxist, Leninist, or Maoist approach towards building socialism.
Okay. Do you also disagree with Marxian socialism? Because specifically those two examples that you gave did have the element of the dictatorship of the proletariat, where control of the means of production, at least in the initial stage, was given to the state. Is that something you disagree with?
That is what I would refer to as vanguardism, and I'm not a vanguardist. No.
Okay, so you hope that incrementally over time, with democratic votes, to implement what the USSR implemented, but without the revolution.
Uh, sort of. Although I don't think that there are. So for the USSR, I'm not necessarily in favor of abolition of markets. I think that markets are perfectly fine for production of certain commodities. I think that like for instance, I don't want the government, I don't want like a nationalized government owned industry in charge of making shoes for me to buy. I don't think that the government is good at doing that. I think the market does fine at doing that. I think that I would want to have enterprises engaged in that production that have a higher degree of worker ownership and democratic control by the workers. But I don't think that abolition of markets outright is something that like I ideologically subscribe to. I told you in text chat, like I don't really consider myself like an ideological hardliner. I'm not one of these leftists that you're going to argue with that's like I've adopted X ideology and now I'm going to contort all and jump through all of these logical hoops to make the world fit that ideology. I think that's really short-sighted. Um so I think that like there's lots of areas in the economy where nationalization, decommodification, and some degree or another of economic planning makes sense. I think the private sector already engages in this to a certain extent, so it's not so foreign to us to think about economic planning. Um, but yeah, for the USSR specifically, like I think that I mean the Stalin era was obviously terrible, and there was very little redeeming qualities to it. But after that, it's sort of a mixed bag. There are some things that they did well. There's a lot of things they didn't do well, and you'll find that in the history of pretty much every nation on earth if you look at it.
So if you are okay with some markets, or I don't know, mostly markets with some nationalization, then
Yeah,
I assume that you accept, well, obviously money, but so it's not a cashless, it's not a moneyless society. It is
yeah.
you will have inequality, you will have monopolies, you'll have, I mean, potentially you'll have, I don't know, pollution and profit motive and stuff like that.
I don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. I think that perfect equality, a cashless society, the abolition of the state, you know, if you're an anarcho communist or something, I think that these are fine thought exercises. They are fine idealistic goals to always work towards. Do I think it's realistic to actually achieve? Not really. I
What
think
do,
that it's
can
a
you
direction to move in,
can you
sort of perpetually. But
can you expand on it's fine to work towards? What do you mean by that?
so so if you think of like perfect equality as a like everybody is equal, everybody has the exact same material conditions. If you think that is like perfect equality, right? I think that as an idealistic vision, that is a good thing to work towards.
Why?
Um, but well, because I think that like
So
people
explain it.
have like I value people equally, and I think that like the most ideal society is one where everybody has equal opportunity and equal material conditions.
Well,
Hmm.
that's equal outcomes.
What if they're all? But what if the end result of that is everyone has really like shitty economic conditions?
We're sorry,
Oh, sorry.
we're kind of in a
Oh,
debate.
I didn't know you
We
guys
we
were in a one-on-one. Sorry.
yeah we kind of I guess we can move to 101, but I was fine with other
No,
people
no, I
coming
didn't
in.
know it. I did not know that. I just had was asking
No,
questions. I
yeah, we
apologize.
talked. We like scheduled this ahead of time, so
No problem. No,
but
no. I'm a mod. I don't want to intervene in in your little debate. I'm happy to just listen.
yeah,
Okay.
no worries.
Continue.
So I mean, so yeah,
I'll
equal
repeat.
outcome. Like
I'll repeat what I
yeah,
said. So basically, I said that's equality of outcome. So everyone is the same, has the same, will result in the same things, same outcomes.
um, no, I mean I don't believe in the kind of equal outcome that has to be artificially created. You know, but my belief is that people have differing degrees of talent and skills and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and that's not like given equal opportunity. There, um, people might because I do believe in like meritocracy, right? So if you you know people who are more talented and more intelligent, maybe it's not unreasonable to expect them to achieve like better conditions, better standards of living for themselves. But
Hmm.
my intuition is that if equality of opportunity was perfectly equal across the board, the disparity in the outcome between people would be a lot more narrow than it is today. And I that is something that
Why is that
is
important?
at least like,
Why is that
why is
important?
that important?
Yes.
I mean, is it not? You don't think it's important for?
What's the justification for it? Sorry.
I mean, just based off of principles, you don't think it's
Yeah, yeah.
important for have a
What is the moral justification for it? Sorry.
I mean, I think it's sort of a normative claim, right? Like I just think that people in society should all have equal opportunity to achieve as much for themselves as possible.
Well, to some degree, you're. I don't think you can make the claim that it's equal opportunity. I think you're stretching it to egalitarianism that everyone has equal stuff, equal things, and you can say that from some point they can take it from there, and that will be the equal opportunity. But why is it important to do this? Why is it important to you to do this in any case? What is the moral justification for it?
I mean, so like I said, the moral justification is basically that I mean, on a basic level, I sort of think it's unfair that some people are born into really good circumstances where they have lots of opportunity, and other people are born into shitty circumstances where they have no opportunity. That's sort of like a if you take if I if I make a normative claim that's like I believe that society should be fair, then it's downstream from that claim, right? And that claim is sort of like axiomatic in a way.
Yeah, you can say that is my core axiom, or like a irreducible primary. But how is it? Let me put it this way: if someone was born to good circumstances and someone born to bad circumstances, why is it the case that someone was born to good circumstances has to pay for, let's say, pay or sacrifice something uh, in that situation, because it's not necessarily their fault that someone else was born into bad circumstances. So when you say fairness, is it just like across the map? I just like it to be fair, or is it
Well, it's
is
not
because
just I like it to be fair. It's I think there's also a pragmatic argument to be made in the sense that I think that we have a societal interest in maximizing sort of the equality of opportunity that different people in society have, because opportunity translates into one's ability to actualize a potential for talent and contribution to society. And I think that given a society that lacks that sort of equality and opportunity, that we all miss out on the talent that's squandered because of less than suitable conditions to develop it and actualize it as a force, as a component in the greater force of productivity in the society, right? Like somebody who's born in really poor circumstances, who has very little access to quality education, in another life, this person might actually be very talented. Given the resources they need to actualize that talent, this person could be a very high functioning member of society. They could be, a doctor, an engineer, or something like that. But because of the opportunity that's denied to them, they're never able to do that, and we miss out on having them do that.
Okay, so the argument is that it's beneficial to have a fairer society, or society with more equality of opportunity, because then you get to because then the people in that society can benefit the rest, can do stuff or achieve things that benefit the rest of society. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, basically, I think that we all have a vested interest in maintaining a society that has equality of opportunity.
Okay, so let me say this. In capitalism, let's say free market capitalism, the basic idea is that while you may not have the same starting position, all the obstacles are removed, or as much as the obstacles are removed from achieving success. So essentially, if you are born poor but you're very ambitious, then you basically will get like a rags to riches story, where the things that stand in your way, as many of the obstacles that would stand in your way to become rich, if you choose to work hard and work smart and do all the things that you need to do to get rich. And just like if you open like any book, like How to Get Rich, kind of do these 10 things. If you do these 10 things, then you will become rich. So that will be like the benefit of capitalism. So while you may not have been born equal and born equally, you can still achieve success and benefit the rest of society, according to what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true to an extent. There are people who do that, but I think that overall, the broader trend is that people who are born into poverty, even if they do climb the economic ladder, they climb the economic ladder from out of poverty into lower middle class. People climb the economic ladder out of upper middle class into being rich. But the biggest predictor of where you end up socioeconomically is where you started socioeconomically, right? I mean, like, obviously somebody
we don't have the free market capitalism I'm espousing, but if you want to go back in history, and let's say you take early America, when all the immigrants were coming in, you had like basically poor immigrants from Ireland, from Jamaica, and within like by the second generation, or maybe something like the first generation, they were doing very well. Like Jamaicans, for example, were doing better than I think it was in Manhattan where some of them landed. This is not slaves. These were just post-slavery Jamaicans. They landed there. They opened their own businesses, and a generation after them were doing better than the whites in that area, as a comparison. So I think if you want to tell a story with social mobility, I mean, immigration is and certainly in freer markets has certainly a lot of things to say.
I mean, sure. I don't think that it's like the entire history of capitalism has been all just nothing but terrible. But I think that more broadly, like, if we think on a more societal level, and maybe we think a little bit more collectively, we have enough resources in this country to give everybody a quality education, good housing, good nutrition, good healthcare, all of that stuff, the baseline
we really
that people
don't.
need for development.
We really don't. That's
We absolutely do. We absolutely do.
I would say that's a bit pie in the sky. I would say, and this is the problem I have with class struggle, that the idea, that the philosophical notion here is that we have abundance currently, and the only reason why not everyone has like a good or enough abundance is because some people are holding it, like a class are holding it away from everyone else. So you have a situation in class struggle where it's man versus man, where we've achieved abundance, but we just haven't distributed it yet. When in reality, it's not true. In an ideal world, it should be man versus nature, because nature is what causes us to be hungry, what kills us with diseases and viruses, what kills us with hurricanes and floods and whatnot. So if we had a situation where instead of us fighting each other because of different classes and working together in a sort of harmonious way through capitalism, through trade, as in a peaceful way of cooperating, I think we would achieve a lot more. And I think even if you think about it from like a societal point of view, you'd have like this framework for achieving human flourishing, and everyone will benefit from it. Everyone in that society will benefit from it. I don't agree that we have enough to solve all the problems. I think that's wishful thinking.
I mean, you say that, so a couple points to that. If it was not just if man versus man was not a factor here, and it was only man versus nature, then why is the scarcity that is a product of nature not distributed evenly, right? I mean, the fact that like we do have resources that we've extracted from nature, but those are the allocation of those resources show high degrees of disparity. It tells me that the conflict cannot only be explained by man versus nature. There's obviously also a man versus man element. Otherwise, why would they not be?
To some degree, you already agreed with inequality to some effect. So you've said that we're not all the same, and we don't all have the same talent. So just by that, we'll have some degree of disparity. Now, if we just say we have high degrees of disparity, then I would say to some degree, one of two things. Either it's as a result of government intervention in the markets that have caused it, and I can specify, or you could say, you could have like a bad way of viewing it. For example, you can say there are global companies that operate within America, but the headquarters is in America, but they operate across the world, and all the money is pooled in America. And then, but you take like an Excel sheet and take the money that's in America and compare it to everyone else, it looks skewed. So it depends on how it is that you're looking at it. But in general, America is doing well. It's certainly doing better than where I'm from. So for example, if you take the household income in the US, including for federal transfers and social programs in kind, the US has almost twice as much money. Sorry, the US median household has almost twice as much money as the British median household. So obviously, you guys are doing something well. The people there are benefiting from it, and people here that have all the social welfare programs that you are aspiring to are not doing that well. I mean, we're economically stagnating. We've got very high taxes. Again, and we are struggling to pay for our national healthcare service, and amongst other things.
Well, one of the reasons for that is because capitalism is predicated on a notion of endless growth, right? Because it's investment in endless growth and increasingly continually increasing rates of return quarter over quarter that is necessary to keep this economic engine of capitalism going, right? Because if I'm investing in a company, it doesn't matter if I'm getting the same dividends from that company. If I'm a shareholder, it doesn't matter if I'm getting the same dividends from that company quarter over quarter. If my dividends are not growing, then there's no reason for me to invest in the company. I'm going to divest and take that money elsewhere, which means that firms within capitalism have an artificial drive to always maintain a certain level of growth, regardless of whether or not the growth of that sector of economy is demanded on a societal level, whether or not people actually need it. That's one of the issues with capitalism that I have. So yeah, when economies stagnate, when the GDP growth percentage year over year, that rate starts to go down, then there's a lot of economic symptoms that arise as a result of that are completely and totally artificially created. There's no change in the amount of natural resources that a country that's experiencing something like this has. There's no change in the amount of labor force that a country that's experiencing like something like this, like a recession, has. It's all artificially created. It's in the numbers. It's just because capitalism requires that growth, and if it doesn't, the whole system starts to break down, which is why and it's not going to get better, because this is just the trend of development in Western nations and modernized nations. As we reach a certain level of development, our populations will start to taper off, our
Okay,
economies will start
let
to
me
taper off, and our rates of growth will start to stagnate. And if we don't do something about that, if we don't
sorry, you are
take
for
our economic system and then translate it into something that works a different way, it's going to cause the whole thing to break down.
hold on just a second. So you are for degrowth? You want to like stop the notion of growth or the emphasis on growth?
I want to grow the parts of the economy that we decide need to be grown, and I want to maintain the parts of the
degrowth.
economy that we
Got it.
decide don't need to grow, and I want to degrow the parts of the economy that we decide need to shrink.
Like energy production.
It depends. Yeah, I mean, maybe it depends.
Right. So
Like,
you're a socialist degrowther. I got it. So Jason Hinkle and all that. I understand. Yeah. So I would disagree vehemently. First of all, I would say that the idea of growth, economic growth, can be infinite or is infinite because it's not based on materials per se. It's based on human innovation. Human minds try to solve problems, and you can say that we have a finite planet and we have a certain number of atoms on it, a finite number of atoms on it, but how we coordinate those atoms through the human mind is in fact infinite. Is infinite. It's a very, very large number. It's the same way of taking like a chessboard and putting like a grain of rice and doubling it per square, and you'll get a very, very high number. So in terms of economic growth, we're talking about human innovation. We're talking about improving our standards of living. We're talking about things that people find useful that improve their life. And in general, we kind of tie or at least the UK does, our welfare systems based on that economic growth. So for example, it's not the case that we pay the same amount of money for the National Health Service. We expect the economy to grow and we expect to pay it more every year. But if it doesn't grow, then we don't have the money to pay it more. So for example, if we like the requirement is to increase the budget for the NHS by 4% every year, and let's say or people will start getting worse services, and over time things cost more and more money as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with something called cost disease, but over time things become more expensive, especially in government services. They just increase price over time, and if we don't generate more wealth to fund those things, then they become worse. And especially now, if we actually shrink, then it's unsustainable. So either way, I mean, you can't. It's not like we have enough of anything and we just need to distribute it. That's not the case.
Well, that's just a symptom of how the economy works, right? So, like, for instance, like a good example of how the need for constant economic growth can introduce incentives that are societally harmful is, for instance, in planned
Pause.
obsolescence.
What do you mean by this? What do you mean by this? So let me just preface what you said. Technically, economic growth is stuff people want to pay for. So why is that society harmful?
Economic growth is things that people want to pay for.
Yeah, when you make stuff that people want to buy, they want to that it improves they decided it's going to improve their life, so they wish to pay for it, or they are happy to part with their money for this good that will give them more benefit than the money in their pockets, right? So
yeah,
how is that a negative thing? Because now you're basically kind of saying that people going after stuff that they think will make their life better is bad for society.
That's not what I'm saying.
Well,
I think
I'm saying that's what you're saying.
I'm saying that's not what I'm saying, and your response to that is you're saying that's what I'm saying.
Let me explain. In essence, what I've described is how markets function. I think we can agree on that. You're saying sometimes that hurts society, so I'm asking you to clarify in what way.
So I was about to give an example of that before you interrupted me, right? So the example, a good example of this is planned obsolescence, right? So if there's a demand for a certain product, let's say, I don't know, laptop computers. It can be any product, but laptop computers, because I'm on one right now. There's a demand that people have. They want to have laptop computers, right? So there's a firm that comes up and they produce the products and they sell it to people, and people have their laptop computers. And we're done. Everybody has it. Good. Except that's not the case, because once you achieve like a market saturation and everybody has that product, the shareholders don't like that, because you're not selling a product anymore. So you have to invent a way to keep selling the product. So you purposefully make your products inferior, more disposable, more replaceable, so that you make it a phenomenon where people buy a new product, ditch it every 1 or 2 years, throw it in a landfill, and then buy a brand new product. There's not an incentive on building quality things that last, and can be modified and repaired and reconfigured, to serve like a long service lifetime. Because if you do that, that is against shareholder interests, because shareholder interests are to increase profits quarter over quarter by selling more product at more margin. Right? So that's an example of how the pursuit of endless growth can introduce incentives that cause things to function in a less than ideal way.
Okay, let me reply to your example. So I would say that even if let's say Apple wants to sell phones every year, and they would like people to give up their phones and buy new ones, throw away the old phones and buy new ones, it obviously doesn't always work out for them, because they themselves are complaining that people aren't doing it fast enough, and that the people are keeping older phones for longer. And they even have this incentive program that when you buy a new phone, you can hand in your own phone for some cash back, and they'll recycle the phone. So it's not in a landfill either way. I, for example, have an iPhone 7 that I'm still using. And also with laptops, with Apple laptops, you can have it for like 4 or 5 years. Obviously, you want the shinier things and you want it to go faster. And over time, there are new requirements that people want faster hardware for. That's perfectly normal. But I would say, in terms of the landfill example, I would say that you're missing out a key example that is beneficial for society and, I assume, nature. It's something called dematerialization. In a iPhone, we have several devices that you're no longer using a separate device for. You're no longer using an MP3 player. You're no longer using a GPS. You're no longer using a torch. You're no longer using a calculator, and so on and so on and so on. You're just using one tiny device with all these features that, in fact, is extendable with other apps as they come along. And you don't need to buy like 10 different devices and carry those with you. And those devices would have some kind of material component with them that would then need to be thrown in a landfill. With capitalism, everything tries to be more innovative, include more functionality, more things, and as a result, you have dematerialization.
I mean, that could be an aspect, but planned obsolescence is a very real and documented thing, and it's not
so
just
is
with
dematerialization.
Okay, but still, I mean, you have the problem of like disposability. Companies have a profit incentive to engage in practices of disposing waste that are environmentally harmful.
Well,
They
I don't
have
agree.
interest.
I think that's a function of
You
the
don't
government.
agree? Wait, you don't agree that you want to know what water in my country was like before the Clean Water Act? Rivers were catching on fire.
Again, let me rephrase what I said. So, in my world, through what I would suggest as more of a legal system to protect against property rights violations such as pollution, these would be less of an issue. The problem that you have in your world is that a company goes to the government and says, I would like to dump this waste. Can I dump it here? And then they'll do the following calculation. They'll say, look, this company, let's say, produces steel, and in a utilitarian sense, steel is very valuable for society as a whole. So we're going to allow them to pollute a little bit or a lot because what they produce is valuable to society. Similarly, in the UK, like around the time of industrialization, in the cities, there was a lot of pollution from chimneys, from smog, like really thick smog from burning coal, and there wasn't like a filter on it that reduces it, and everyone was like coughing. And around the city there was smoke, but the result of that pollution, which was electricity, people wouldn't dare give up on. Like the mayor wouldn't. No one wanted to give up on that. Over time, when countries get richer, what is known as the environmental Kuznets curve, you over time, like when countries don't have any money, they pollute more because they want to get more energy and manufacture more things. And then over time, when they reach a particular point of wealth, they start caring more about the environment, and they start reducing the pollution and becoming more efficient with certain things. And that's basically what we're seeing right now, where, for example, when GDP and CO2 emissions have been decoupled in the more richer parts of the world, Western countries. So over time, we're emitting less CO2, but the GDP still keeps going up, so it is decoupled.
Okay. I mean, you don't think that companies have a profit incentive to, like, what profit incentive do companies have in like disposing of waste pollution in environmentally friendly ways?
So what I'm saying is, they may wish to just dump it, right? But in a system of property rights, if you dump waste in my backyard, I will sue you for a lot of money, and they would not be able to dump it in that manner.
What are you going to sue? What law are you going to sue them under? There's no Clean Water Act.
Like in court, you violated my property.
Legally, how would you argue that? If there's no regulatory definition of what
if you dump waste. Well, sorry, is the question is how do I know that you've dumped waste?
No, how do you, like, you don't just sue people for violating your property. It's usually you sue them because they violated a specific law in regards to your property.
No, they dumped garbage or waste or pollution in my property. They violated my property, and just on that I take them to court.
Yeah, but if there's no legislation or regulation that establishes what acceptable
the
levels
property
of
rights is.
Are you going to finish? Are you going to interrupt me the whole time? Because if that's where it's going to go, I'm just leaving.
Go ahead.
All right. So if there's no regulatory basis for what the standard is of water quality, then somebody violated your property. It's just your opinion.
Right. So there would still need to be like a certain degree where I go. So if it's not obvious, like they didn't dump like a pile of pollution on my property, and I see the pile of pollution, I see them dumping, and I said, hey, you can't do that, I'll take you to court. That we agree is understandable, yeah?
I mean, yeah, that's pretty blatant, but the problem with water pollution is that it's obviously it's usually not like visually detectable. There can be trace elements of very harmful chemicals in the water, and without institutions that are deputized to enforce regulations in order to monitor this thing, the burden putting the burden on individual people that own property is just never going to work, and it didn't work in history.
Allow me to answer your question. So I would.
Hello. Joe, continue. I'm sorry.
So we have a debate here. Yeah, so let me answer your question. So you would need someone in the law to say that if you would need objective levels that say if your water has above something of a particular chemical, above something of that, then someone has damaged your property. And once you have those in place, then you can say, then you can go to your water, detect the difference, and say, this person has dumped in my water because it's downstream from me, and I'm going to sue them for that.
Yeah, congratulations. You just described how the Clean Water Act works.
Right. There's a difference between what I'm suggesting and regulation. I'm not sure.
That is a regulation. That would be a regulation.
Right. So this isn't what I'm suggesting is not a regulation.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
That's
so
what regulations are. That's what regulations are.
So let me explain the difference between a violation of property rights and regulation. There's a fundamental difference between the two. Regulation is, in a sense, you're guilty until you prove your innocence. Meaning, there's a regulation that says you can't dump this, and you have to prove before you do anything that you're not going to dump X. Whereas in a sort of property rights or any rights violation, you're innocent until you're proved guilty. So someone has to prove that you violated the rights. You go to court and you say, look, here's my word. Here's the evidence for them violating the rights. They have violated my rights, and I need compensation. So it's the opposite in that sense.
What's the benefit of that, right? Because if there's a big factory, if there's like a giant power plant or factory that's operating, and a lot of times these things need like large amounts of water in order to fuel steam driven turbines or something. So they put on a river, right? And let's say that we want to keep the purity, like the quality of the water in that river good. So part of the permitting process is that the company we require by law that the company developing on the rivers, like the side of the river, has to demonstrate like a water purification system that meets what such and such standards. Why is that bad? Isn't that just like catching the problem before it happens?
So the problem is with regulations is that they're highly restrictive, and they basically, they're basically crippling. They're basically crippling to the economy, and in the way, I can explain why. But let's just for a second. The way I'm saying is it's still handled by the government. It's just not by a regulatory agency, but by the court system. And the court system obviously has to be reinforced. There has to be more objective guidelines to these things. But it's not like a regulatory agency where you speak to a bureaucrat and they have to pass a certain amount of laws, and it becomes very. You get in the situation basically right now where you have 4.7 million restrictions on companies in the US, at least from 2020. So it's very difficult to know what it is that you've broken or what it is not that you've broken, and it's just very difficult to operate in that sort of environment. If let's say you want to open a factory, there's 250,000 restrictions that you need to learn, before you can start anything. Or if you don't, then you can get fined or put out of business without you even knowing that you've broken anything. So it's very difficult to know these sorts of things. And I think in general, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which I don't think it's a government thing, I think it's like a outside the government thing, said that the regulations on the whole cost the U.S. $1.9 trillion a year. Now, in my system,
but do you know how much? But do you know how much those How do we know? Like, think about how much money those regulations saved. Because you know what? Why we have those regulations is because 100 years ago, rivers were catching on fire, fish were dying, and people were losing their arms in factory machinery. You don't think that there's a cost associated with all that damage?
Right. So, okay, you threw a couple of things on me there. So again, with the river catching fire would fall under my suggestion. I'll do the OSHA one in a bit later, but with the river catching on fire will be within the realm of what I've suggested. And I think to some degree my suggestion was actually stricter than yours, because with yours, I can say, for example, that the US military pollutes more than 140 countries combined. The other wings of the government do not regulate each other. These agencies basically are outside the voting mechanisms of the government. They basically can do what they want, more or less, and they're not voted in. They're basically full-time employees. I think it's if you want to look at the very negative thing of it, and we can talk about things like the FDA, where it's basically halted new medicine from saving people's life. We can focus around the issues around the AIDS scare in the 80s and how the FDA didn't approve certain drugs that because they didn't take it seriously at the time, or the drugs that they needed to approve, like the process would be 5 to 10 years and people were dying then and there. So we can look at the regulations and everything like that, but you can say that this is like a core of them, but could be useful. I think that my suggestion covers that core very well. But in general, they're very crippling to the economy and helping people get what they need.
Okay, I totally disagree. And one of the reasons I disagree is because just some info about me. Like I'm an engineer. I work as a power systems engineer. I deal with regulatory agencies. And a lot of these cases in industry, the regulations don't come from the government. They come from the industry.
Right.
The regulatory agency is just like a bulletin board where we stick it, right? So a lot of times there's regulatory agencies that exist in industries that exist because the industry back in the day begged for it, because regulations actually promote universality. They promote like technological compatibility. They promote reliability. They promote all of these things that help streamline and make an economy run more efficiently. So yes, they require an economic investment. They require money to function. But the point of it is that it's cost savings. It saves all of the costs that are associated with all of the disasters that that happen when you have unregulated industry.
Well, I'm not saying that I'm for unregulated industry, and I do like your example, because I would say that I think the market self-regulates quite well. So, for example, we have the example you gave. We have business insurance, which would kind of like incentivize companies not to be in situations where they're litigated for a lot of money, and would kind of like nudge people through price mechanisms. We have underwriters. We have standards bodies. We have all these things are positive in my sense. The thing I'm against is the state having like one large agency where they have to they have to be responsible for a huge range of different industries, and it's like a bottleneck that cripples progress. And in addition, it's a very
but that's not how it works. There's not just one big state agency that regulates everything. There are many different state agencies, and there's collaboration between state agencies and non-state agencies and academic institutions and private institutions. There's a whole range of this. There isn't just, and a lot of these are completely independent from one another. There's not just one big regulatory agency that regulates the whole economy. That's just not how it works.
No, not. I didn't say a whole economy. I was specifically thinking of one industry, but it is the case that if you have like one large agency or several government agencies, that it's highly bureaucratic and it's inefficient and it's a bottleneck. And in addition, the incentive of the regulatory agencies is basically to say no to everything, to deny. They have what's called the precautionary principle, where if something goes wrong, they'll get in trouble. But if they deny something and no one can experience this new medicine, they will not get blamed. So I could say with a degree of certainty that the FDA is making it very difficult to pass to approve medicine. It also withdraws medicine like after a while. Every year it withdraws a certain amount of medicine. It takes about $4 billion now. I'm not sure about this statistic, but I saw it like from a study. It takes about $4 billion now to go through a variety of different compounds, that at the end of all this work, you'll have one approved patent that you can then sell on the market from the FDA. So it's becoming more and more expensive and more difficult to release medicine.
Okay, you say it's becoming more and more difficult to release medicine, but I'm looking at data that, because I was curious, so I looked it up. I was looking at data on drugs that are approved by the FDA each year, and like it's not going down. In fact, in the past few years, it's been going up. So I mean, like, there's no relationship between like
how much does it cost to approve?
Being approved. Well, I don't know, but like, don't you think it's important that there are studies and trials that go into clearing a medicine for public use so that we understand that it's safe before we approve it?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not against like it being safe. I'm just explaining that.
You're just against the whole process that goes into making sure that it's safe.
I think you're being facetious here. Obviously,
Well, like,
I
how
want.
else are we supposed to
Yeah,
like? What? How do we go up? So do we just clear a medicine out the gate and we just wait until like X number of people die from it and then we act, or like what do you? What's the alternative?
well, the alternative will be like some kind of market-based uh, testing facility like the FDA, but that's funded by, let's say, doctors that are interested to know if this particular drug solve this particular problem. In addition to that, if you did have something like that, you could have that for drugs that are out of patent, which you can reuse drugs that are out of patent for new diseases, new viruses.
You don't think that leaving a process that is meant to assess drugs
I
for
am leaving a
medical
pro.
efficacy,
I am
you don't
leaving a
think
pro.
that you
I
don't think
am.
that leave you don't, I'm not if you let me finish, you would understand that that's not what I'm saying. Seems to be something that you struggle with. So you think that a process that is designed to make sure that drugs have medical efficacy and are safe, leaving that up to market forces, doesn't introduce perverse incentives?
Why do you don't think doctors are interested that the things that they use have efficacy and are safe?
All I know is that drug pharmaceutical companies have a financial interest in selling their drug, and if getting it cleared as a safe drug is a barrier between them and being able to do that, it seems to me that they would be willing to pay a lot of money to get the correct opinion that they're looking for from the people that are in charge of doing that.
You mean what they're currently doing with the FDA?
I mean, I'm sure that's what you think they're doing with the FDA,
You mean like
but
sorry, specifically people who work in the FDA then leave the industry and work as consultants for those same businesses to then be able to approve the drugs faster, like fentanyl and stuff, and the thing that replaced Valium and all that kind of synthetic opioids. You mean
yeah,
that?
the revolving door, that's a problem.
Uh huh.
What do you think is the
So
bigger
the,
cause of
so
the
you
problem there? The FDA is an institution or the corrupting influence of capital?
the FD any kind of institution. There's only one, right? Any kind of institution that's government institution that's supposed to regulate an industry will over time have like a symbiotic relationship with that industry. It's just a fact. Whereas if you have like a market-based solution, we have more than one option. If one of the like inspectors or regulators, market-based regulators, is turned out to be corrupt, then people will not pay them money to give their opinion. They'll go out of business. Whereas the government will
See,
never
the
go
thing
out of
is,
business.
See, the thing is that you say like if we had a market-based solution, if we had options, but if you don't if you know anything about how this works in the private sector, you would know that you would not have multiple options because these industries depend on having an authority that they can put a stamp on their drug to show everybody that has medical efficacy and that is safe. And eventually, over time, like the way that it would happen is that these multiple choices would consolidate into a single choice that now has like no democratic accountability to the people and is only accountable to capital.
That's nonsense. Of course, you have options. In everything, you have more than one option. Especially in capitalism. The only way you would not have more than one option, even to what you've described, is if the government says, I only want one or only want three of these agencies to exist and no more.
Do you know about the breakup of Standard Oil?
Yeah.
Monopolies occur organically in capitalism forever.
No, that's false. What was Standard Oil broken up for? Having too low of prices? That's really bad.
No.
That's
What?
what they got broken up for. The prices were too low.
Okay, so monopolies are totally caused by the government. It never happens in capitalism. That's what you're telling me?
So what I can say is that objectively, the markets are the best ways to reduce monopolies over time. You can have a monopoly in capitalism when you create something new. So, for example, if Apple comes up with a new smartphone that no one else came up with, they'll have a period of time where they are the monopoly for that particular item. Standard Oil was for oil refining. And then they bought up some other refineries and stuff like that. But year over year, they've reduced prices. And the reason why, if you're interested to find out why they got broken up, was because Rockefeller funded the person who ran against the president at the time, whereas J.P. Morgan funded the person who became president at the time. And J.P. Morgan, we're talking about antitrust. J.P. Morgan had 3 trusts that he funded: the Steel Trust, Railway Trust, and I think Meat Packers or Meat Manufacturers Trust. None of those went before the antitrust, but the one that didn't pay, that the president didn't like, within, I think, 3 to 8 years was broken up. But you can't say that it was broken up because it acted in a predatory way, in a sense that the customers were paying high prices because they didn't have any other option. It was very low prices year over year.
Okay, so I'm reading the Wikipedia article on the breakup of Standard Oil, and it says that the government cited the reasons as being 4 illegal patterns related to monopolistic practices, and it was secret and semi-secret railroad rates, discriminations in the open arrangement of rates, discriminations in the classification rules of shipment, discriminations in the treatment of private tank cars. So, like, I don't see anything.
So nothing to do with the.
Too low.
Let me. Sorry. So I would like you, if it said it has to do with predatory pricing, because that was the large reason, because the prices were low, and they were assuming that because the prices were low, they were trying to get rid of the competition and then increase prices. But is there a case for antitrust? Let me just ask the question: is there a case for antitrust that the customers were paying high prices because it was a monopoly? Was that the issue?
I mean, I don't know. I don't see anything about it in here. But like, if you're arguing that one of the natural outcomes of monopolies is that the consumers pay lower prices, then wouldn't you be
no the opposite?
Monopolies?
Let me explain. So the idea of coercive monopolies is that a consumer would need the product, but they have no other option to go to. So the coercive monopoly can increase the price indiscriminately, with disregard to demand. But that didn't happen in the case of Standard Oil.
Okay.
That's it?
So you're in favor of monopolies then because they decrease the consumer prices that they pay?
No, that's the opposite of what I said.
I'm confused. Why are you anti-monopoly?
I am in a sense I'm anti-monopoly because I'm pro-consumer. A capitalist system is the best way to reduce monopolies. I
mean, why? Because you talk about Apple, right? Let me tell you what actually happens in the real world. What actually happens in the real world is that Apple doesn't have exactly a monopoly, but they have an extremely high percentage of market share. So when you have other companies that sprout up and they do make innovations, what do? They're not a competitor to Apple. What they do is they innovate and they invent a product, and their goal from the very beginning is to be bought by Apple, because that's the game when you get to that level, is you buy up the competition, you buy up the competition, you corner the market, and then you use that to basically operate as a quasi-monopoly. It's not in the interest of capitalist business owners to have competition. Competition forces them to drive their prices down to compete. They don't want to drive their prices down because lower prices means lower profit, and their main motivator is profit, which means that you have an incentive there to consolidate power within singular, a few corporations that have massive market share. People always talk about how the best aspect of capitalism is the competition, but within capitalism there's an incentive structure that de-incentivizes competition. You want to eliminate competition.
Right. So the businesses within capitalism would choose to reduce competition as much as possible, because that would eat into their profits. But as it is the market, and there's, let's say if it was free market capitalism, and there's no or very little barrier to entry, then if you have a product or service that has a high profit margin, and someone else sees, oh, this is a good market to come into, then you have they'll pay the whatever it costs to pass the barrier to entry, and then you'll have a permanent competitor. So just on the thought of having a permanent competitor, companies don't increase their prices.
But there's always a barrier to entry in capitalism. The barrier to entry is capital.
Right, so, but as I explained, they'll pay the capital, and then the other person will have a competitor for life because they've committed to it now. They've paid the capital, they've paid for the infrastructure or whatnot, and now they have to generate a profit, so they'll compete and lower your prices. So companies, just on the threat of that, will keep prices low.
Wait, companies will
Did you
keep
understand?
prices low just because they'll keep prices low just because they're afraid of a competitor happening to potentially come about in the future?
Yeah, if they have a very high
Why?
profit margin, sorry,
Why? Why would they do that?
because they don't want they don't want too many competitors.
No, because if I increase my market share,
Mhm.
you know, by no, the reason companies actually lower their prices is to secure market share, right? So if I'm selling a product and I'm selling it for the cheapest and I have a huge corporation and I can benefit from economies of scale and run my
Mhm.
business more efficiently, what I do is cut my prices as low as possible to secure as much market share as possible. Then when I secure that market share, I jack up the prices and get them as high as I can to get as much profit as possible. Then if a competitor comes about later, what do? Then is when you slash your prices down and actually operate at a loss in some case, just to steal all of their market share and deny them entry into the market. That's
Right,
what actually happens.
but you can't do that infinitely. You don't have an infinite amount of cash to like keep warding off new competitors. And when a new competitor starts, they don't have let's say you try to do that and you said I'm going to lose money for a period of time to kill my competitor, and then let's say you succeed, and now you have a loss that you need to make up, but no problem, I'm just going to increase my prices and make up the amount of money that I lost. Then if you raise the prices and a different new competitor says, oh, there's an opportunity here, I'm going to come into the market, they come into the market, they don't have the loss that you incurred to get rid of the previous guy. So you're operating at a disadvantage to them because they don't have the issue that you do.
No, that's not true.
It is true.
Because these No, it's not true because companies that start up do you know companies that start up nowadays and in the past,
Mm-hmm.
it's often years before they turn a profit, right? So like they're already operating in the red upon startup. That's how it works, right? So
Right, but
they
they're
don't
not.
have an advantage. And then also furthermore, if I'm starting up a company and I already know that like the Apples of the world, big corporation, or like do this thing because I know that they do because like I'm smart and I'm a business guy, like hypothetically in this situation, I've studied it. I know what their strategy is. Why would I do that? I know what they're going to do. I know that they're just going to kill me. So why would I even have the interest or the incentive to even start up a competing business in the first place when I know that they're just going to fuck me?
Right. So in the first example, I already said that you need some capital to enter the market, but it's not like a heavy loss that you did to get rid of a competitor that you competed for a long time, and you tried to give like really strong, really low prices. And by the way, for the really low prices, have you ever considered that the competitor can just let's say you're selling alcohol and you're selling it at a much lower prices? Why can't the competitor just buy alcohol from you at this low price and sell it to other people, because you're offering it at below price rate? So they're like, yeah, okay, give it to me.
Wait, well, what? Why can't a company just buy your product, mark it up, and sell it at a higher price? Why would
Yeah,
I pay for that as a consumer? I could just buy the cheaper version.
you could buy the cheaper version, but I'll buy all, like the other competitor will buy all of it. Like you won't have the option. You'll take all the stock of what they have at the very, very low price that's below your price, and then sell it on.
I just
And
won't sell it to you.
well,
I know. I'll figure out what you're doing.
I won't say it's me. I'll find a way to get a middleman, but I'll just buy a lot of it. This is something that already happened. Just an example.
All right, stop.
So
You're being ridiculous. Reaching
this is
super far.
how about this? How about I give you a animated video to explain to you how monopolies
Watch a
work in free
video.
markets? Well, I mean, you can watch it later. It's not, but it's
You
like
can put it in
people just have a lot of
now.
misconceptions. Hold on, people just have a lot of misconceptions about it.
Chat or DMs. I may or may not watch it later.
Sure. So basically, what was the? So as far as I know, from everything you said, nothing here hurts the consumer. So you had a period of time where two companies were battling out on low prices, and you have another example, and prices were low for the consumer either way. And then you can say the same thing for like China lowering steel prices, for example. Yeah, obviously the consumers benefit from artificially low steel prices. And so you're saying like if companies like Apple, Google, or Facebook, if you start up something, then they'll buy you out. Technically, good for the companies that did it. I mean, Facebook and Google offering services for zero money, so it cannot necessarily be a monopoly based on price. Apple, I don't know. I mean, there are companies that
they
start
sell
up.
to Apple.
Yeah. There are companies that start up just to be bought by another companies, but when they do that, they are very aggressive to the company that bought them to take as much money from them as possible. So, for example,
how much?
Sorry.
In these negotiations, leverage is everything, right? Like how much leverage does a tiny ass little company have when it comes to negotiating a buyout price?
Well,
If they agree to it, the bigger company will just go, "Oh, you don't agree to it? All right, well, we'll just continue to smother you until you stop existing."
Well, apparently a huge amount of leverage, because the following example that I'm going to give, basically, do you know Groupon? Do you know who Groupon is?
Yeah, Groupon.
So Groupon was in America, and there was like two brothers that basically create companies just to be bought. So they succeeded with one company, and then they tried to make a Groupon competitor in Europe. So they were able to basically very quickly get something up and running. They had artificially low prices to get more people in Europe. I think it was around Germany specifically, and it was pretty much like a blatant copy of Groupon, changing the logos a little bit or the colors a little bit, but it was pretty much the same idea. And when Groupon wanted to buy them, in a sense, when they're buying them, they're expanding into the European market. So they asked for 10% of the value of Groupon in shares, and they got it, which is huge.
Okay.
Well, as an example.
Yeah, but this circles back to what I'm saying originally too, because it's like that sort of practice, the incentive structure and the dynamics within capitalism make that like a financially productive activity to engage in. But is it actually productive in any meaningful sense? Are those people being productive? Is that really the best use of their time, just playing a game that ends with them cashing out for basically creating nothing? Like that's what I'm saying.
Let me guess. You want to centrally plan everything so it's the most productive possible, yeah? Right?
No.
How would you be more productive? Go ahead.
I want to centrally plan some things that make sense to centrally plan, things where market incentives, in my opinion, cause more problems than they solve.
Well, that's your opinion, but the fact that you're centrally planning stuff means that if you take a look at any other example of central planning, it doesn't become more efficient at all. The reasons for right. So you can say I want to centrally plan, not for efficiency reasons, but for public goods or public services, but not for efficiency.
It's also more efficient.
It is. I don't know about you, but my NHS is far from it.
It's way more efficient than my country's lack of a healthcare system. Even within my country, to the extent that we do have limited socialized medicine, like in our Medicare system, if you're familiar, it's for people over 65. Mm-hmm. All the statistics on this shows that, like, it depends on if we're defining efficiency as in the amount of money you put into something versus basically the financial measurement of the output of that function, mm-hmm. Medicare is more efficient in this country than private insurance by a factor of like 20%. Like over 80% of all of the funding that goes into Medicare in this country goes towards actual care. And it makes sense as to why, because you're cutting out the entire overhead and profit margin for a privately owned firm, which is why private insurances in this company, the statistic is like abysmal. It's like 60% compared to like 80-something.
Sorry, did you finish? I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're wrong on that. So,
We'll pull it.
I'll explain. So the
You
amount
don't have
of money.
you don't have to explain because we can just look.
Yeah, okay, if you want.
Because I don't. But these statistics are publicly available. Like I'm more interested in what they actually are versus like you explaining them. So Medicare efficiency versus private insurance.
How are you defining efficiency?
I already defined efficiency. So, efficiency in a healthcare setting would be the amount of money that goes into the system. How much of that is actually goes towards paying for the actual healthcare services?
Okay, so let me ask a point here. I believe the U.S. is paying $17,000, I don't know if it's 70% of GDP or $17,000 per something, while the UK is 9,000. So obviously you're paying a lot more. You could say that the elderly are receiving more care, but are you overdoing it? Are you overspending in a sense? Because obviously you are spending more than other countries by a lot.
We're spending more because it's privatized, because we're spending for the profit margins of the insurance companies that stand as a middleman between us and actual healthcare facilities. Right,
but the private healthcare isn't as generous as the public side. The public side is like, I don't know, 65% of all healthcare spending is from the government, and it's already very high. And I am aware that on the private side, it's more efficient, or at least the numbers aren't anywhere near as high as the spend on the public one.
So I'm looking for more current data, but in 2009, at least, the per capita cost of Medicaid. This is even what I was talking about. This is Medicaid, which is less efficient than Medicare, as far as I know, is 22% less per capita than the equivalent private insurance, which makes perfect sense because you're paying it's operated at cost, and also Medicare and Medicaid can negotiate with private like healthcare facilities prices.
So I don't agree. I do have also a chart that I'm looking for now. I don't know where I put it, but I don't agree with what you're saying, and I'll explain why. It's not true that it's obvious. The private sector, while has it's regulations or like different, like more complicated ways of accepting payment for certain things from the hospital, it does have an incentive at least to cut the costs of how on their end of how those are processed. So we'll have like more automation, more of these like in administrative innovations, whereas the government would not. And I am aware that there's some sort of faulty calculation where you say, specifically on the administrative side, where you say, oh look, the administrative side costs like 12%, but in the public side it's like 3 to 6%. But when you look at the overall spend, at the total spend, it's 3 to 6% of a number that's 3 times higher than the private one.
Okay, this is a study from the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation. They found that private insurers paid nearly double Medicare rates for all hospital services.
Yeah, I just said that. I literally said 12% to 6%. Just said that.
No, double.
Yeah, this is saying 12% is double or 6%.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Okay. But like, I mean, your explanation for that doesn't make any sense.
No,
like,
I have the chart. I've seen the chart. I'm just trying to find it. I really don't know where I put it though.
Also, and so there's paying for like profit margin and overhead, but then also private insurance. It's a totally perverse incentive. Like, okay, a couple things. First of all, it's a perverse incentive because insurance companies have a profit incentive to take in as much money as possible from the beneficiaries via premiums, deductibles, copays, co-insurance, all of that. They have incentive to take in as much of that as possible and dish out as little as possible. So you're setting up a healthcare system where the people in charge of providing the healthcare have a profit incentive to deny healthcare.
Yeah,
Second of all,
I'm not gonna. I don't really. I'm not gonna justify the American healthcare system. I don't consider it free market, and the main statistic I use for that is because only 10% of the people in the US pay out of pocket, and I would consider that to be the measure of free market.
I mean, it's really easy to say that something is not a
Well, I can give a better system, which is 60% out of pocket, then I would reference that.
You think that
I don't
people
think I look I
afford pay
I don't think
$60 60% out of pocket? Are you insane?
no, that's what they do. The healthcare system there, it's cheap. It's much cheaper, and they pay 60%. 60% of all healthcare treatments are paid for out of pocket in that country.
Which country?
Singapore.
Yeah, because everybody's fucking rich in Singapore.
Okay.
It's a
Woohoo!
financial titan, like on the global stage. Yeah.
Well,
most countries,
more recently,
real countries,
yeah.
Most countries that are actually real countries with real economies aren't like that. Singapore is extremely rich.
Oh, okay, so let's get rich like Singapore.
Singapore is rich because they've stuck themselves into the cog, like financially, and they're extracting wealth from the rest of the world's economy.
The US has
Singapore
a lot of financial markets.
Singapore provides nothing. What does Singapore produce? They produce shit. They don't produce anything. It's a banking country.
It's not a banking country. It wasn't always a banking country, and right now they're making moves to be more in the high tech. Singapore is a much nicer country than you are letting on. I mean, look, I don't agree with how I don't agree with how the government.
I'm sure it's nice, but it's rich for a reason, and the main reason is that it's economy based off of finance.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's economy. I think now it has more finance than it did in the past, but it used to be trade because it was like a shipping route, like a trade route for ships in that region. And back in the day, they were dirt poor when the British left them. They were very, very poor. They wanted to join with Malaysia. And then Malaysia rejected them, and the guy, though, I forget his name, made certain like changes. Some of them a little bit authoritarian, some of them a little bit market-based, some not so much. And over time, they made them very rich. Similarly, Hong Kong, fishing village, no natural resources. Very, very. I mean, obviously, since 2019, they've been clamped down. They've been clamped down a bit more.
Hong Kong is rich because it's China's exclusive economic zone. It thrives off of China's economy.
But China has several economic zones.
Yeah, was it Hong Kong? Was it Macau? And what's the other one?
Macau is a Portuguese. Well, it's a former Portuguese colony, but you had Shanghai. You had 4 economic zones basically in '79 or the 1980s when you hear what China opened up to the West. This is what they mean. But Hong Kong, in and of itself, was a fishing village. They didn't have any natural resources, and then from that, they've got skyscrapers everywhere. They did very well, and a lot of it is to do with free market.
It's a financial haven for Hong Kong doesn't produce anything.
Look, you keep saying that, but I don't think you fully understand what it is that you mean. It's like they have some finance sector now, sure. They do other things as well.
What is Hong Kong?
And it's not like the US, and it's not. What do they do? Let's find out.
Yeah, I'm looking at their breakdown.
Okay. What would you like? Highest exports?
Well, no, I mean because I'm sure most of their economy is not even based on exports. So
the top if you tell me what are gold, integrated circuits, gas turbine, broadcasting equipment, and silver.
So the biggest, if I look at Hong Kong's, that's their exports. But how big does of a part of their GDP do exports in general make up? I'm guessing very little.
Well,
right?
I mean, if you want the finance industry in general, then the UK is also a lot of that is finance.
Yeah, well, I don't consider finance to be like actual production.
Right. Okay. I don't know where it is we're going right now, but in any which way, like if you're saying a country is rich, I'm all for everyone getting rich, especially the poor. Like let's make everyone rich together, and let's get like really affordable healthcare services that don't cost an arm and a leg like they do in the US, and that everyone has access to them.
Yeah, well, if I look take a survey of the world and I look at the healthcare systems,
Mhm.
in developed nations that are the most efficient in the metrics that I laid out, they're all socialized.
What do you mean? I'm not following you.
They're not market-based systems. Market-based systems for healthcare don't make sense. Like, so this is my problem when I talk to people like you, is that it seems like you
People like me?
like you.
I'm offended. Go on.
Yeah, people like you. I said with all due respect, I don't have anything against you personally.
Okay.
But when I talk to people like you, it's almost like you've presupposed market economics as like the supreme ideology, and everything has to be run in a market setting. And I just think that's asinine. Like, obviously, some things lend themselves more naturally to markets, some things don't. And it all depends on the nature of the thing. And I think healthcare, for one, is something that very obviously does not work well in a market setting.
Okay. Let me send something to you.
And one of the reasons is that healthcare is in large part, especially except for like elective procedures, healthcare is inelastic demand.
Right.
Market forces break down. It doesn't matter how much something costs as a consumer. You're not going to make an informed decision to undergo life-saving treatment. You're going to pay whatever it takes, which is why market forces just break down as a concept.
Okay, can you please click on the link I gave you? Got some graphs in there for you. With me? First graph?
Yeah.
So this is like, I don't know if you've seen this graph before. It's also in other places. But you see like that basically there's like a division of the top services that over time just seem to keep increasing in costs. This is US. Our medicine, and then you have education, housing, and I think inflation is around the same line as food and beverages. Like it should be, like food and beverages and inflation should be the same, this over time. And everything under that like gets cheaper over time. Things that are less labor intensive and have less government intervention, subsidies, and things of that nature, whereas the top ones do. So here's why I think, with regards to healthcare, that just based on that, it just gets more and more expensive over time. Like in the UK, we're right now paying 12% of our GDP to keep the NHS running, and the NHS is getting worse and worse over time. In terms of a lot of metrics, in the sense that how long it is to get an ambulance if it's not like the highest criteria, if it's the second highest, how long to get an ambulance, how long to get your test result from. Cancer is very, very bad in the UK. If you have cancer, you may want to go outside the UK for treatment. Operations can be cancelled at a moment's notice because it's all free, but free doesn't mean it's not rationed in a particular way. Someone makes a decision on that. And in terms of like rationing as well, like you can probably get like average medicine for a lot of people. You could buy that in bulk, but the sicker people that need more advanced medicine or newer medicine or expensive medicine, those will be much, much less available under the system. And it's only going to grow over time. If you look at charts below,
everybody does rationing. We do rationing for healthcare in the United States. The difference is that we do rationing based off of the patient's ability to pay, not rationing based off of essential need.
Oh, okay, but do you still have rationing in either system? Like it'd either be like
but I would rather ration based off of who needs the healthcare most.
No, that's
versus who can pay for it.
That's not how it works. There'll be like a committee that decides who gets the stuff and who doesn't. In fact,
probably based off of a reasoned assessment of the facts to determine who like needs it the most immediately.
in fact, if you know some people, you can probably get ahead of the line if you know someone on the committee. If you scroll down to the other graph.
No, let's look at this real quick. So this
Sure.
graph, right? You had one interpretation. My interpretation of this
Which
is
one are we
that
looking at? Sorry. Which
did you
one?
link another one? You only linked one.
There's several in this page.
Oh, I was just looking at the thumbnail. Okay. So the first one,
Okay, cost inflation in labor-intensive
which is what I was looking at. Yeah.
Yep, go
So you're saying this is from the US, first of all, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know why this is called cost disease socialism, because as an American, I'll tell you that these hospital related services, college tuition, other schools fees, medical care, all of these in housing, all of these in the United States are private. So I don't know where socialism comes in because they're all private.
Can I
and second
answer
of
your
all,
question?
And no, I'm not done yet. So, like, second of all the other ones that aren't experiencing this same rate of increase, it's probably because the ones that are increasing the most are the ones that are the most essential, the ones that people can't live without. I mean, you can live without going to college, but it sort of affects your ability to actually have like a good job nowadays where you achieve high degree of material conditions. So, like, it doesn't surprise me that toys and apparel and shit like that are going down, because if like those are harder to afford, then people just won't buy them. But people aren't going to not get healthcare because it's not as easy to afford, and we don't want them to, because then the social consequences of people not getting healthcare are terrible.
Right, that's really cute how you just made that up on the spot, but let me explain what cost disease socialism. So there's a whole theory around it. The Niskanen
What is this page? Is this just like your crackpot theory page?
So then I'll
Is this what I'm looking
send
at?
you proper links with proper reports if you like. So the Niskanen Center is basically the one that came up with the term cost disease socialism. The short definition of cost disease socialism is when the government policy restricts supply and subsidize demand for human capital intensive industries, causing prices to rise dramatically over time. So basically, in industries that are labor intensive, the government intervenes because there are a lot of people there, and for political reason, it starts to intervene. Because people want more healthcare, let's say, the government subsidizes this to some degree, so it's less price sensitive. The market mechanism stops functioning, and then at the same time, it restricts the supply of those same things. So think certificate of need, restricting of doctors because of the, I don't know, some AMA something. They restrict the number of doctors every year, so doctors will have a good salary. So you restrict supply, you subsidize demand, and then you get this result of cost disease socialism. Cost disease itself is a concept by someone called Baumol, where he said basically the price of wages goes up in an economy even if there's no innovation in a particular industry. So let's say, I don't know, you collect garbage bins, and it hasn't improved it's there hasn't been any improvement in garbage collection in decades, but in every other place in the economy there has been improvements in productivity and innovation, and they're offering more wages. So the garbage collectors are competing for wages with all other parts of the economy, and therefore their wages will go up even though they haven't become more innovative. So that's the idea, but it's kind of the cost disease of Bowman has kind of been like somewhat debunked. But this new concept, cost disease socialism, as I'm describing here, is the new concept that a lot of economists, as far as I know, even on the left, this is Niskanen is left, center of left, agree with.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know why it's called cost disease socialism when all of these things are privatized. Like,
right, but the government government heavily intervenes in these industries. It heavily intervenes in the medical sector. It no longer functions effectively as the market environment. If it's subsidized, for example, there's less pressure to reduce prices. If the government says I'm going to pay for a pill,
Yeah, based off of your description, it sounds to me like the government is trying to subsidize the demand side of the equation, and then the privately owned supply side of the equation is reacting to that by trying to restrict supply in order to maintain profits. And the result is that the unit cost experienced by the consumer increases over time, which to me sounds like a problem that's caused on the supply side.
Well, you didn't listen to the certificate of need.
I did listen to everything you said, and that's the takeaway that I have. That this is a problem that's being caused on the supply. My takeaway is that this is a problem being caused on the supply side, based off of a reaction of the private sector to the government's attempt to subsidize the demand side.
When the government is restricting supply artificially, what does that not increase the price?
How is the government restricting the supply artificially?
Okay, what is the certificate of need in the healthcare sector?
Certificate of need? I don't know what the certificate of need is. Explain.
Okay, if you want to set up shop as, let's say, a hospital or like a doctor, you want to set up an office in a particular town, you need to get a certificate of need, meaning your competitors in the area need to tell the government if another hospital or another doctor is needed. If they say, or ambulance service, if they say it's not needed, you can't start a hospital or a new doctor's office.
Yeah, that's a reaction on the privately owned supply side of the equation, and in response to
what is private if the government doesn't let you start your own office? I don't understand. The government is saying no, you can't. Your competitors are saying you can't start your business through the government. Well, how is that private? I don't understand.
Because I'm sure that there's an incentive on the existing competitor side to say that, so that they don't have competition, so that they continue to charge high prices.
Of course, but the government is the one that's allowing them to, is the one that's enabling them to do that. In what market can a competitor say you cannot enter? I don't give you permission.
I don't know. There's probably a lot of them.
Oh my God.
Like really, really, really heavily like regulated industries. I'm sure there's a lot of other examples of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway,
but I'm sure that you say that like regulation is the problem.
Well, certificate of need in this example is a problem. Do you know the statistic that says that black women who give birth have a slightly higher chance of dying than white women? Are you familiar with this?
No, but it doesn't surprise me.
Right. So, do you think this is to do with racism?
Not like direct racism, but I don't know. You're probably trying to trap me into saying something. So why don't you tell me what the actual reason is?
Well, not necessarily, because I'm going to explain it anyway. So basically, the problem is that with certificates of need, they don't allow, what is the doctor for women? OBYN, OBGN, something? The prenatal care. The certificate of need don't allow new like hospitals of those or new businesses of those to open up in areas where it's like a higher black population. So there's like prenatal deserts in a sense, in the same way that there's like food deserts where you can't get fresh food in particular areas. There's like prenatal deserts where black women can't find this particular services, so they don't know certain things, they don't get certain care, they don't get certain advice, and as a result it affects their survivability during birth.
Okay, what do you think the solution to that is?
Remove certificate of need.
I'm looking at, because I didn't know about certificate of need. I'm looking at it. It seems to be a state by state thing. Like not all states in the U.S. have that law. And the concept of certificate of need in the field of healthcare first passed in New York in 1964. I'm trying to learn about it because I don't really know about this. So,
when you're done, can you go back to the page? I want to show you some NHS related statistics.
I mean, I'm assuming you're probably going to show me a bunch of statistics showing like bad things about the NHS.
It will only take a minute. So in the same page, I think it's the last graph. It says expenditure of National Health Service in the United Kingdom. With me?
Government health expenditure. Yeah, okay.
So it started off under 4% of GDP was going to the NHS for a while, right? The 1990s, not that much of an increase. And then even in this one, this is 2012, it's I don't know, 9% here, it's 12% now. And we, again, back to the economic growth point, we're not growing enough to fund this. This keeps going up, it keeps increasing overpriced. And you've seen it, if you go back to the top, you can see it's also increasing overpriced. It's a global problem. And if you go to the middle graph, you can see all countries, Germany, France, United Kingdom, Sweden, they all pay more health expenditure as part of GDP. Now, you could say, maybe we got more innovations, maybe the population is getting older. And it could be because these things are getting more expensive over time because of the way that the government offers these services and how it's outside the market and increasing. Actually, I think I don't have it here. I'd be
interested to see how much of this is like correlates with the aging of the baby boomers.
Great. So I do have one for Singapore, and I actually don't have it here, but if I did have it here, because I've seen it before, it's barely gone up in the whole. It's like a relatively flat line. I should actually find it. I'm pretty sure
they have a baby boom like the West.
Sure. I mean, it's not like they died off because of. I'm not aware of like a war.
Population pyramid.
I'm not aware of a war that killed a particular generation off before another one. So I'm gonna say yes. Like,
no, it seems that's like dishonest. You know what I mean by population pyramid?
I'm not sure I am.
Population pyramid of Singapore, right? So this is a very helpful histogram that can be used to visualize the generational drift of that's a term I just made up, but
okay.
It like you can visualize the demographics of a population by generation, and you can see how that stratifies. And if I look at Singapore population pyramid, and then I look at, let's say, the US population pyramid. Let me see. Okay.
They're upside down pyramid.
So this is
right. I don't. With regards to the Singapore health expenditure as percent of GDP, I don't have as far back as 1950, but 2000 it was 3.34%. 2019 it's 4.0. So, compared to the spike you saw in the UK, relatively flat, like 3.5 to 4.8, 4.0, right? So yeah.
Okay.
And unless you're telling me like some kind of magic, I don't know. I don't think they'll have some kind of deep change in population that you're making this claim, but I'm happy to be told otherwise.
I wasn't making a claim. I was just wondering what the correlation was, if there was any.
The correlation is this cost disease socialism is what I'm trying to say. This is a phenomenon that you can read about in the links.
Yeah, but the thing is, so this data shows that there's an increase in you have this Our World in Data thing, and you have this one specifically for the NHS in the UK. These bottom two graphs. These are showing that healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP has increased dramatically from 1960. But the thing is that I don't necessarily care about that on its own. I want to know how that relates to improvements in healthcare outcome metrics.
Yeah, I mean that's
right, because if we're spending more and we're getting better results, then it's worth it.
I'm fine with that assessment. That let's put it this way, right? If you go back to the first graph, you can say the same thing for like televisions and vehicles and toys and household furniture or whatnot. Like they also get better over time. They also get more innovation and more features and functionality that people want. And like, I can accept that, we've knocked out all the main diseases. Now we're going for like the really extreme ones, and those cost more. Sure, you can throw that in there as well. But like you don't have the mechanism of reducing price. Like things, like in a regular free market, things cost less over time because of innovation and productivity, and the value goes up. Whereas things that the government like has a firm grip on cost more over time, and the value either stays the same or goes down. So, for example, in healthcare, I don't think you can say that from, I don't know, 98 to 2021, that tuition has gone up by 300%. I don't think you can say that it's 300% better, the actual service.
I mean, no, not in the United States, but you have to remember that we don't like our I mean, we have publicly owned universities, but they're all operated well, we have private universities too.
I think even the
But there's
private one gets paid
the
something.
reason why university tuition in the United States has gone up so dramatically is very complicated. I don't know if I want to get into that right now, but I don't think it's as simple as what you're saying.
Is it because of
There's a lot of
a
different
lot of
factors.
the need for more administration?
I think that's part of it. I think also that another thing in the United States as well is that a big factor in universities are basically like the aesthetics and the allure of big fancy facilities and giant sports teams and stuff like that. All of these require funding. These drive like the price of tuition as well.
Right, but
The price of tuition is being funneled into a lot of like research and stuff. There's grant money that goes into that too, but that's a factor. Like there's a lot of factors into why
the
this is
facility
happening.
one that you just mentioned, that's an example that it's not a market mechanism, because
It is a market
it,
mechanism because you're investing in
I'll explain.
fancier it is a market
Let me
mechanism because
explain.
you're investing into fancier facilities
I
to
understand.
attract more students who are the consumers in this scenario.
I understand, but you could also attract more students by reducing price, right?
I mean, yeah, but
But
that's like the
but
model of a community college, and those are good, but
no. Let
they're
me
generally like
let me explain. No, I'm not an expert in the US, but as far as I understood, is that because students get a student loan, or more or less the amount of money that they pay is somewhat fixed. Like they'll get like this amount of money anyway. I'm not sure how, but that's my understanding. That part is not part of the market. You're not competing for a lower price, because the how they pay for the tuition is somewhat fixed. So what they do on the offside is, because if that amount of money is fixed, to attract students, they'll pay for larger facilities, because then they'll get this fixed amount instead of that fixed tuition cost going to another university. It goes to yours because you have a jacuzzi and the other university does not.
okay. Well, I mean, this is an interesting thing. I went and searched this real quick.
Okay.
And when we're talking about the raising rates of tuition in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
it's generally all gone up. But something interesting, though, is I don't know if you're familiar with universities in the United States. We have public institutions and we have private institutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the public institutions are not free. They're generally cheaper than the private institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is if you look at 1975 until today, and you look at how much tuition has increased in cost, public institutions have increased on average. This is for full-time 4-year undergrad tuition, fees, room and board. Public institutions have increased by about what is this, $11,000, and private institutions have increased by $26,000.
Okay.
So the private tuition has increased twice as much as the public has. And I think that makes sense because like they're operating with a profit motive. They're trying to extract as much money out of the students as possible.
Dude, you really need to stop that. You really need to stop this sort of like conspiratorial thinking. I've just shown you in several graphs that these things.
Wait, hold on. It's conspiratorial thinking to suggest that private institutions have a profit motive?
Yeah, you're thinking, is the profit motive in and of itself is not a negative thing. Every time you do a trade with someone else, you're doing the profit motive. What is profit? Profit is other people's money sitting in their pocket, and you need to persuade them that you have a product or service that's valuable for them to part with their money. That is how you get profit from other people. So it's not like profit is evil. They just want to maximize profits, like some kind of accounting guy with monopoly and a monocle in his eye, kind of like smoking a cigar and calculating. I'm telling you, these are things outside the market mechanism. If they did have market mechanism, then they would compete on price. Someone at least would.
No, this is you.
Why would they not? Why would they not compete on price?
What you describe, first of all, no private institution wants to compete on price. They want to do that as little as possible.
Okay, let me offer a difference.
But second of all, what you described is not profit. What you described is revenue. Revenue is not the same as profit. When you convince somebody that the service that they want from you is worth the money they have in their pocket, and that service that you give to them is worth the money that they have in their pocket, that's revenue. And if the exchange is equitable, the profit evens out to be zero. Profit is what happens when you leverage disparate power in order to facilitate an unequal exchange. So that you get more from them than they get from you.
I don't know what you're talking about at all. This is not
profit by definition is when the producer or the seller gets more out of the exchange than the consumer does.
No, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
What is a trade?
That's what profit is.
What is a trade? No, that's not true. What is a trade?
Trade is I give something and you give me something back.
It's a mutually beneficial exchange, right? Both of us benefit.
When you define it that way, then I guess it is.
Are you kidding? Hold on.
You don't think that unequal exchange occurs in trade? You don't think that if I have power over you in the exchange, then I can use that power to get more out of the exchange than you do?
You're saying that someone can charge more money, right? And they can get more out of it than the other person, but both people get something out of it. Otherwise, there's no point to the trade. If I trade with someone and I lose, there's no point to the trade. I'm not forced to take the trade.
All right, let's say that you and I are stranded on an island, and I have a loaf of bread.
Oh my god!
Let's say I'm trying to sell you a loaf of bread. I'm charging $500 for it. Will you buy my loaf of bread?
No.
No, but let's say that we were stranded on an island. There was no other food source, and you were starving. All you had in your pocket was $500, and I said, "I'll sell you bread for $500. Would you buy it for me then?"
This is I don't want to. This is so okay. And what is the connection? What is the connection to your example to day-to-day trading?
The connection.
Am I living on an island? Am I living on an island now?
No, the example is a reductio ad absurdum to demonstrate that profit is what happens when there's disparate power levels that are brought to an exchange.
Listen,
and the person with more power leverages that power over the other person to get more out of the exchange than they give.
Dude, stop for a second. This is complete bullshit. This is conspiratorial Marxist bullshit. This is not how trade works on a basic level. You're saying there are times when someone has more leverage over the other, so they can get slightly more money out of it. Sure, that can happen, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it's an unfair exchange in any sense of the word. It simply does not. Because we
I'm
are
not moralizing it. I'm not moralizing
I understood
that's what profit. That's what profit is.
No, that's not what profit is at all. That is not what profit is. That is simply not true. What you're saying. It's perverse and bizarre how you're describing it.
No, it just betrays your ideology. So that's why you don't like it.
You have an ideology yourself that is making this claim. Are you kidding me right now? If I want to buy a
conversation, you are the most ideologically hardline person on this that
I have some economic understanding of what I'm talking about. Doesn't mean I'm ideological, and I'm giving you graphs and data to stuff that you're not familiar with, and I'm showing you trends and concepts that explain these things relatively clearly. So I don't know if that's ideological.
No,
I'm sorry.
They don't. They explain the data that they give relatively clearly, but the conclusions that you're choosing to draw from them are not self-evident within the data. This is what you made a Reddit post where you were complaining about lefties who didn't like your data, and now I see why. Because you're given this data, and the data is very clear, and what it's telling me on the face of it is very clear. But then you're nesting on top of this all of these conclusions that are just not they just don't follow. You're just making that up because it conforms to your ideological presuppositions.
Dude, you saw my charts. You made up something on the spot, which wasn't accurate, and you're saying that I'm ideological.
In your opinion,
Jesus Christ! You basically guessed, right? You took a guess. You used your ideological lens and said this could be the reason, and it's not true to the conclusion of the people that made the graph and made the paper and explained it in detail. What is cost bomb? What is cost disease? What is cost disease socialism? Here are some examples. Why is this accurate? Why is this been debunked and is no longer true? You can read the whole paper. I mean, I'm just summarizing it for you, but you're saying I'm ideological. So you read it yourself and tell me what you think.
No, it's not
I
that.
didn't invent it on the spot, though.
Yes, but the way that you're framing it is very deliberate, right?
Read the paper. Okay, fine. Read the paper yourself. Not now, obviously. Frame it whichever way you like, right? I don't care. Just read the paper.
Let me read through your whole article. Let's just break it down, all right?
Do it later. Do it later. But
no,
look,
you're done.
Back to profit. I want to talk about profit for a second. Back to profit. The idea.
No, you were making lots of claims. I wanna look back at this again because
I'm saying read
maybe
it
I
at
was
your own
not
time.
fair.
I'm saying read it at your own time because it's a long paper.
Why don't you want me to read it now?
The actual Niskanen paper is several pages long.
Well, I'm just reading through your article, like the claims.
Yeah, you can read the article. You
list.
Go for it. You can read that. But the actual like report that I'm referring to, that's not skewed by myself, you can read that on your own time. Anyway.
All right. So, okay. Cost disease socialism happens in a few parts. Restrict supply by subsidizing suppliers, heavily regulating them. So how do you, right off the bat, how is subsidizing supply restricting supply? Isn't that like an oxymoron?
The heavily regulating is restricting supply. Subsidizing them means that they don't need to,
because of an ideological presupposition. So
no, you asked me a question, at least let me explain it. Heavily regulating them would restrict. Subsidizing them means they don't need to work too hard to lower the prices.
What?
If you give them if let's say I sell eggs, and you're the government and saying, look, no matter how many eggs you sell, for each eggs that you sell, I'll give you like an additional $0.50. So an egg is $1, I'll give you additional $0.50. Now my profits are much higher. I don't need to work too hard to get a good profit because it's subsidized by the government. I'm already doing well.
Yeah,
I have less of a market
problem. That seems like a problem with profit. That seems like a problem with profit incentive.
Well, the government is giving you money, so you don't need to overproduce.
Yeah, because your main goal is profit. So as long as your profits are being satisfied, you don't care that you are offering a lower quality service because you don't care.
It's nothing to do with quality. Nothing to do with the quality of the service at all. It's just the number produced.
Yeah, but what you're saying is it sounds to me what's causing the problem in this scenario is the profit interest. You don't seem to
look. You don't seem to understand what the profit motive is. So I don't know what to discuss with you over. You think the profit motive is when people take advantage of other people.
I mean, yeah, that's like very moralized language, but essentially, yes, that's what profit is.
Well, I disagree. I think that you're basically saying
you don't think that profit is taking advantage of other people?
Explain how
you can say that taking advantage of people is good.
No,
like you could say that's good, but that's what it is. It is an advantage.
I disagree completely, and let me explain why this is
profit's
fundamental.
Not advantageous.
Let me explain what I want to say. So basically, capitalism is based on trade, mutual, beneficial, voluntary trade. If we don't, as a core part of it, this is the peace and you achieve peace and prosperity through this mechanism of the trader principle. If you're saying that this very principle that capitalism is based on is morally abhorrent, then the whole thing is gone. That's it. There's no point to it. There's no point to markets. There's no point to any of it. It's all morally abhorrent and should be abolished.
I'm not moralizing anything. I'm just saying that profit. No, like the basis of capitalism is not just to trade.
It is.
Companies don't. No, companies don't just trade for the joy of trading. They trade for profit.
Yeah. Everyone trade for self-interest. So this is the point really in trade. So I want something for my own self-interest. You want something for your own self-interest. We have this mechanism of trade that when we engage in it, both of us are self-interested and both of us benefit from this process of trade. Because we have this mechanism of trade, we have a harmony of interest because we both are self-interested, yet we cooperate and we compromise and we work together and we all benefit from this mechanism of trade. So while everyone is self-interested and working hard in their own little area of whatever it is they want to produce, everyone in society benefits from this harmony of interest. If you're saying this is exploitative or taking advantage of, then the whole thing crashes down like a house of cards.
It can be.
Well,
it's not necessarily exploitative, but it can be.
But do you understand?
And don't act like so. Like, and capitalism didn't invent the concept of trade. Trade was around for thousands of years before capitalism.
Yeah. A lot of things were thousands of years before capitalism, like property rights, markets. A lot of things were for thousands of years.
So, like in trade, if I'm a firm and I'm trading with you, my incentive is I do better when the amount of the trade that I get, like the monetary value of what I get from you, is less or is more than the monetary value of what I give to you, right? And I can use leverage in order to do that, right? And in a sense, that's leverage, right?
Leverage. Okay.
If I have in the context of the trade, if I'm coming to the table with more power than you do, then I can use that to leverage.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what more power. I don't know what more power means.
Like, as in, you need the thing from me more than I need the thing from you in return.
Sure. Okay, great.
That would be leverage.
That is more power?
In a sense, yeah, it's more power in that context. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, but I still want that thing, right?
You want that thing and you need it more than I need the thing I'm asking from you. And I can use that in order to get more out of the deal than you do. And that's what profit is.
Hold on. Before you get to the leverage stage, what is profit?
Okay, profit is you're engaged in an economic activity. You have costs associated with that, and you get revenue
not the
from
accounting.
That.
Hold on.
When you take revenue minus cost,
not the
that's
accounting.
Profit.
I don't need the accounting definition of profit. I mean, I need the economic definition of profit.
Is it different?
It is different. Yes.
Oh my god. Profit is just. I mean, it's when the revenue that you take in minus the cost is profit. I don't know what other definition.
That's the accounting definition. Okay, so let me try again. Let's take an example.
Is it going to be super convoluted? Let me just Google it because I don't know. I don't want to hear whatever definition you make up.
I'm going to give an example, not a definition. It will be super simple for you to understand. Let's say
I don't want an example. If there's a different definition, then I want to know the definition. Profit economics definition. The financial amount that remains after subtracting both explicit loss and opportunity cost from revenue.
Not the accounting definition.
That's the economic definition from Investopedia. I know it's not whatever special definition you're trying to concoct, but that's you said economic definition. There it is.
Okay, where does profit come from?
Profit comes from what do you mean? What I mean, like I'm a socialist, so I think all value comes from production.
Okay, where does the money for the profit come from?
Money for the profit. It comes from.
You said revenue minus cost. You said revenue minus cost equals profit. Where does the money for the profit comes from?
So where does the revenue come from?
Sure. Where does the revenue come from?
It comes from consumers, like the price they people? Pay, and investors.
Investors is something else. Other people, basically consumers. Yeah.
Yes.
So in order to be profitable, you need to please or sell to consumers, right? They need in turn they need to agree to buy from you. They need, because they're not forced to buy from you. It's entirely voluntary. So they need to agree that what they're buying from you is worth more to them than the money in their pocket, which they then happily hand over to you, and you deduct your cost from and have a profit, right?
It
That's
depends
the
how
trade.
much they. It depends, because I can think of lots of examples where I paid for something that I needed,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time of me paying it, I was like, "This is not fucking worth the money I'm paying for it."
Sure, maybe that could happen, but you made your decision, and we don't have like a government thing that scoops your brain out, analyzed it, and said, no, actually, you didn't need that. Put the brain back in and said, we know better for you. We make decisions. We have an expected utility of what it is that we buy, and we do our best to understand what can make us happy, and then we go for it. Can we make wrong decisions? Sure, but the seller wanted you to be happy.
I don't think the seller gives a shit. I don't think the seller gives a. I don't think the seller gives a shit of whether I'm happy or not.
Of course they do, because
they're quite happy. They're quite happy to fuck me over.
No, they want you to come
if it adds their bottom line.
But it doesn't add to the bottom line to fuck you over. It does not in any way, shape.
It can in some instances. It depends on how much I need what they're offering.
Right, but if they fuck you over, will you go there a second time?
It depends. Sometimes there's not other options.
Okay. You're appealing to monopolies here, but let's say there aren't any restrictive monopoly on a particular product, or you can find alternative products, and that's in general, yes, you can always find alternative products.
Or it's more expensive for you to switch to another supplier than it is to keep.
Then yeah, if you're getting value from it, right? Then great. But it's more beneficial for them if you are a returning customer than if you just buy one time and get very upset and tell all your friends not to buy from them. They would rather you be happy from it. It's better for them.
I mean, it sounds really good when you paint this picture of everybody getting along. And
this is so basic, though. This is just so basic. I don't know where to go from here. This is just so fundamental.
I mean, I guess this is what happens. You just don't understand how to deal with people who fundamentally disagree with your ideology. It's
right,
okay.
but do you appreciate? Can you appreciate that I'm giving you the definition impartially as best I can, explaining to you like just simple mechanisms, and you're like, no, it has to be class struggle somewhere in there. It has to be exploitation somewhere in there. It's never. I'm not saying it's always
That's
perfect,
not even what I'm saying.
But just
you're
the mechanism
doing the
of
same
it.
thing. You're defining terms to erase any element of class struggle. Like you're framing it in a very deliberate
There isn't
way.
there isn't a class struggle here. We're talking about it doesn't have to be like a capitalist and a consumer. This could be like a me and you trading. It can be many different examples.
That's not but that's obviously not what I'm concerned with.
But hold on, I'm not talking about concerns. I'm just talking about the general mechanism.
The general mechanism is the general mechanism, but to suggest that it plays out the exact same way regardless of scale and regards of circumstances is just naive. It's just naive.
What is that to do with what I'm explaining, though?
Because you're saying like, oh, if it's just a trade between me and you, well, it's not. It's not just a trade between me and you. It's a trade between me and giant
corporations. Oh my God, corporations! How about if you buy a sandwich from a vendor? Is that a trade?
Yeah, I'm not concerned with buying sandwiches from a vendor. It's not what I care about.
From a local kiosk or a local co-op.
What if I buy a sandwich? What do you mean? What if I buy a sandwich? What's the point?
It's a trade. I'm explaining the mechanism. There's no.
Yeah, I understand what a trade is. This is like what your tactic is. Is whenever I bring up a contention, you like act like I don't understand a basic concept, and then you like fucking spend like an hour rambling about what the definition of trade is.
Slow down with the psychologizing. We're not anywhere near that yet. I'm just trying to get to the basic principles. Then you can layer it as much as you like. Okay?
Yeah, I understand what trade is. If I hear another explanation of what trade is, I'm just leaving.
Oh dear. So now you want to layer it with exploitation?
Well, what are we talking about anymore? You're going to define trade for the 10th time, or are we going to talk about something real?
Trade is real, buddy. But yeah, I don't need to define it anymore. We've discussed it. I'm glad we agree.
Yeah, trade is when somebody gives something to somebody and somebody gives fucking something else back. Everybody understands what trade is.
What is harmony of interest?
What?
What is harmony of interest? I explained it.
Harmony of interest?
Yes.
It's when I give you something that fulfills your interest, you give me something that fulfills my interest.
No, it's slightly different. It's we're both pursuing our own self-interest.
Is the slightly different warrant an explanation?
Yes, it's super important because it basically means.
Is it really important?
Yes.
I don't, because you haven't talked about something important for the last 20 minutes.
No, trust me, it's deeply philosophical and important. It's a system.
I don't care about what I really don't care about deeply philosophical.
Right. You keep saying that it's harmful for society, right? And it's not the right thing, and we need to involve the government, right? I'm giving you a mechanism that explains at least the mechanism that we can be self-interested and be beneficial to society at the same time.
Yeah, we can.
Great. Okay, continue.
Continue with what? You just
whatever you
derailed the
like.
whole...
So are you a capitalist now? Are you a capitalist now?
No.
Okay, have I been bad faith?
Maybe a couple times, but not like super. I wouldn't say you're bad faith. No.
Great. I'll take that as a victory in a sense. What was the complaint?
Okay. So I got a little bit frustrated at certain points. I apologize for that. But like, it's just you're explaining things to me, and like everything is like I follow all the explanations up to like 90%, and then like the way that you the way that you go about framing the conclusion is just like, no, I don't agree. But then you act like I don't understand what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying. It's just like that you're explaining like this cost disease socialism thing, and how like intervention on the supply side of the equation is causing suppliers to act in a specific way according to their profit motive. And then you're like, oh, the problem there is the government intervention. And then I say, I think the problem right there is actually the fact that there is a profit motive for this thing. Okay, we just have like a fundamental disagreement at that point. Like, okay, who's to say who is correct?
Let me help here. Just like give like an overarching theme, let's say. So I'm already what I'm claiming. So I'm claiming that if something was left to if the markets were left to their own devices, if we didn't have government intervention in the form of subsidies, taxes, regulations, like a minimal, let's say, because you always have some, as minimal as possible, and that is, it's not a labor-intensive industry, then so for example, let's say with cars or toys, you'll have like machines that automate it. It's less labor-intensive. Then over time, these things would reduce in price and increase in value. As in, just this is what the market basically would do. And with this cost disease socialism specifically, the way it's set up is that it takes away market mechanisms from the equation. So, for example, if you say we need healthcare, despite if we need healthcare, no matter what the price, it's moral that people have access to healthcare, no matter if they can afford it or not. Then we kind of leave market mechanism. We exit market mechanisms. And if, for example, the government regulates something, then we exit market mechanism. And if it subsidizes something a bit more, then we slightly move away from market mechanism. And as a result of moving away from market mechanism, the costs go up over time. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but you're saying the cost goes up because like the government is subsidizing the supply side.
The government intervention exits the market mechanism, yes.
So the government is subsidizing the supply side.
It's doing a lot of things.
And that what?
The government here is doing a lot of things on more than one side. And as a result, the market mechanisms are not there, and it just gets more expensive over time.
Okay. Why does it get more expensive over time?
So let's look at it like this. For something to get, let's say, for something to get cheaper over time, you need like competition, you need innovation, you need productivity improvements, maybe let's say automation and things of that nature. You have all those things, then something will get cheaper over time, and value will go up. So like, let's say a car stays the same price, but it has more features, or a car, if after it has more features, then they find a better way of manufacturing, and it's cost less, and now it's more cheaper because your competitor has done something similar, and you need to lower your prices. When you don't have those things, let's say with healthcare, the government comes and says, I'm going to pay $500 for this pill now and in 5 years from now. Like I promise to do that. I will pay $500 now and in the future. There's no incentive to reduce the price. There's no point in allocating company resources to reduce the price of this pill. There's no competition, and there's no need to, because you'll get constant money. So you'll do other things with your resources.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm talking about, because at that point I go, what I say is, aha, this sort of half measure to step in and try to like regulate this industry by the government, it's not sufficient, because of the fact that we've retained a profit motive. You can do all the fine tuning and adjustment and intervention that you want, but the company is just going to take advantage of it, use that to inflate their profits, and like make like offload, and jack up prices on the consumer, and not the actual goal that the government was going for there is not achieved, because the actual supplier is not interested in collaborating with the government to achieve that goal. They're only interested in increasing profits. So my solution to that is, like what needs to happen actually for this industry is it just needs to be nationalized and remove the profit motive entirely.
Great. We in the UK we have an entirely nationalized health. It's literally called the National Health Service, fully nationalized. Maybe some parts, they'll outsource some parts to like private people here and there, but overall, pretty much overwhelmingly, it is fully nationalized. Government pays for everything, certainly for taxes, obviously. Pays doctors, pays nurses, pays for medicine. Typically, like it gets it from America, but it can also get it from other places and in the UK. But fully national health service, and the price is still going up by a lot.
Yeah, but it's still way, way, way cheaper per capita than the United States is. I mean, I'm looking at like Our World in Data, life expectancy, like, or what is this? Healthcare costs per as a percent of GDP and per capita, and
so
United States is far and away. United States is far and away the most expensive. All these other developed nations are way, way cheaper. And what is the factor that's different here? The factor is that the United States system is way more privatized, and all these other countries have way more socialized system. That, like, to me, that tells me like what the right direction to go in. It's not to privatize it more; it's to privatize it less.
Okay, well, Singapore is even cheaper than half even the price of all the other European countries. It's much, much more private, considerably more private. I would say 6 times more private. And it's very good quality of service, very good products, very good what they deliver to the population, very accessible in terms of price. And lifespan is good.
You keep narrowing on Singapore because there is no other example. You can't find another example where this is the case. Singapore is the only example, and Singapore has a very unique economy, very unique like development and all that stuff. Like, it's not comparable to the rest of these Western developed nations.
Why can't I use Singapore as an example? I don't understand. You're not giving me a good reason.
But it's kind of telling that that's the only example you can point to, right? Like every other
I can also give
healthcare system in the world is socialized.
I can also give the US as an example, but I will have to do it over time. So I'll have to give like how much out of pocket spend did people in the US pay in 1960? So it's 47.1% of all healthcare in 1960 was out of pocket, and then as it got more expensive over time, there was an expectation for the insurance to cover it because it's just more and more expensive. And currently in 2020, out of pocket is 9.4%. I can also compare health, not exactly healthcare, but like cosmetic services. and they've increased over the span of, I don't know, 60 years by like 38%, whereas inflation was 66%, whereas the medical care increased by 132% and hospitals by 230% over that same period. So I mean, and again, it's cosmetic surgery. I'm not saying it's identical apples to apples comparison, but I'm just showing examples here where the private sector reduces price, and the conservative Ben Shapiro thing with LASIK surgery and all that. Like these things become cheaper over time, and when you have either insurance or like semi-government plus insurance, they go more expensive with time. But I don't think insurance is the correct way to pay for just any healthcare. I think insurance is like more of an emergency, and then everything else should be accessible enough to pay out of pocket. But if like you need, obviously, if you need like a major operation or you had an accident, yes, that's what insurance is supposed to cover.
I mean, you're just making it way more complicated. I mean, somebody in the United States, I see that our healthcare system is the most privatized in like developed world. I guess
it's not true though. It's not true.
I guess except for Singapore, and like we just pay way more per capita than every other developed nation that has a socialized healthcare system.
Okay, I mean, so look, copy the UK then, see how it works out. Let me know, because here it's really bad.
Probably work out better.
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be even more expensive. First of all, if you read my example of cost disease socialism, if you read the last point, you can never nationalize the healthcare system in the US. It's just way too big for any politicians to commit to it now. There's no way. Like it'll be so disruptive, and no politician will agree to step in that hornet's nest. So it's kind of like, with cost disease socialism, now that it's more and more and more expensive, it's less and less and less likely to be nationalized. Okay. Anyway, yes, Sierra or Panzer, whichever you prefer. Let's end it here.
All right, man. I know it's like contentious. It was contentious at times, but I had fun, and I have no hard feelings towards like nothing personal, man.
Sure, I wasn't insulted, but I would, with regards to the last one in the world data, when I quoted 2000, this is probably where I got the original one from.
Okay, well, I mean, like different organizations calculate these statistics and with different methodologies. It's not surprising that you would have different results.
That's fair. I'm just saying this is probably where I remember it from, and that's why what I quoted, not to mislead.
Look, I a couple times in this conversation, I accuse you of being dishonest. I retract that. I don't think that you're dishonest. I think that I think that a couple of the things that you were quoting are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Anyway,
yeah, no worries. I hope to talk to you again. It was fun.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Yeah, see ya.
Bye, Reichman. Your stands are there. Bye. Goodbye. Your stands are there.